Hello, welcome to Venture Capital. After weeks of intense negotiations, Ukraine will get the long-awaited IMF loan. Plus, Russia's banking cull continues and capital outflow reaches record rates. And we discuss the threat of energy sector sanctions. But first, Ukraine will finally receive the $18 billion in IMF loans over the next 2 years. But the money will not be given unless Kiev takes steps to cut corruption. Kiev will also be expected to enforce harsh austerity measures. But with these cuts comes sacrifices, including a 50% rise in heating costs. As we know, Ukraine has always struggled to pay for its energy bills, even with discounts from Russia. An expected 50% drop in pensions. So for the elderly, that means higher utility bills and less money to pay them with. And a 70% drop in wages for public sector workers, including doctors and teachers. So let's discuss this loan and what it means for the Ukraine economy now with Aris from Business New Europe here in Moscow. So relief for Ukraine then?
Yes and no. Immediate in the short term. I mean, they desperately need some money. They have hard currency reserves to fall to next to nothing, and so they're facing, devaluation and default. So the first tranche, when they get it, will be a massive relief. But going forward, the trouble is the amount of money put on the table by the IMF is not going to be enough to meet their outgoings. So they're going to be in sort of a desperate situation going forward for the next couple of years.
How much would they need then?
Well, the IMF deal, as announced, is between 14 and 18 billion.
Yeah.
But that's paid out over 2 years. Now, if you add in all the other bits and pieces offered by the EU and the Americans and the Japanese, it comes up to a total of 20 billion, which is 10 billion a year.
Yeah.
But then just the debt redemptions this year are going to be 8 billion. And then you add into that the deficit, which is going to be another 7 billion. And very quickly, you get up to a total bill for this year for debt, gas, and deficit of around 20 billion. In other words, what's being offered is half of what they need. And so the question remains is how are they going to finance the budget? How are they going to replenish the hard currency reserves to shore up the hryvnia? So we're looking at an economic decline of at least 3%. The Prime Minister said possibly 10%. We've got inflation that's going to run at 12, 14%. It's an economic nightmare.
Yeah.
And you're going to need a lot more money to stabilize the situation.
And talking about bills, do you think Russia will get back that 3 billion then? Because presumably that's why the IMF are paying out this money, so that Ukraine can pay its bills.
Well, one of the ironies of this rescue package is the bulk of this 10 billion that they should get this year is going to end up in Russian coffers. It's going to go towards repaying their debt obligations, which includes $3 billion Russian bonds,
yeah,
and also for the gas price.
Gas bills, yeah.
And the Ukraine is obliged to repay that $3 billion because the money was issued on the Irish Stock Exchange in the form of Eurobonds. So they can't default. If they default, then they get graded as a defaulter of a Eurobond, and all their rates will go shooting up, and it'll make it extremely difficult for them to borrow internationally, which they're going to have to do.
Talking about borrowing internationally, do you think image-wise, though, the damage has already been done in terms of Ukraine paying back its bills?
To Ukraine, I think as we go into it, people are starting already, this week to wake up to, the really appalling state the economy is in. And it's going to make their life very, very difficult because, as I say, they're going to need to raise money elsewhere in order to get through this year, next year. And that's already going to be hard.
Let's talk about austerity then, if we're going to talk about hardship. There's some pretty tough tasks ahead, isn't there, including cuts for wages, pensioners, gas increases. It's going to be tough, right?
Indeed. I mean, the irony here is that the Maidan protesters have rushed into the arms of Europe because they see that as a promise of a better life. And in the long term, I'm sure the EU deal is a better life because, democracy and transparency and rule of law do lead to greater prosperity. But in the short term, it's actually going to be the other side of the European deal, which we've seen in the last few years, which is austerity, protests, wage cuts, pension cuts.
And comparisons with Greece. That's what a lot of people are drawing at the moment.
Exactly. It's going to be Greece, it's going to be Cyprus. And those populations are really struggling because the cost of getting the economy back into shape is extremely high. And the people who are going to pay for that are going to be the people, not the IMF.
Yeah, got you. All right, we'll leave it there. Aris from Business New Europe. US President Barack Obama hinted at tougher economic sanctions against Russia this week, including the energy sector. There's also been talk between the US and EU about making Europe less dependent on Russian gas. Mr. Obama continued to warn that the isolation will deepen, sanctions will increase. That was his words. So let's now discuss this threat with Konstantin Simonov, the General Director at the National Energy Security Fund. What damage could energy sector sanctions have on Russia?
The most difficult problem for Russia is financing of big energy projects. Yes, in this case, if United States will try to press on investment banks and ask them not to give money, not to invest money to big Russian energy projects, yes, it's possible to have some difficulties. But Russia has a very simple alternative: to go to China and to ask money in China, and China is ready to pay for Russian infrastructure projects. We can remember, for example, S4 project, the pipeline from Eastern Siberia to Pacific Ocean. China gave a huge payment before the beginning of oil supply to China. So that is why China is the real alternative. And the second problem can be technology, because now Russia is trying to begin the production of shale oil, of unconventional oil, and without foreign technologies, it will be very difficult to implement this project. It will be very difficult to start the production of unconventional oil in Russia.
Let's talk about another threat then of the US. They are talking about potentially becoming a gas exporter and delivering to Europe. Now, can you tell me, in your professional opinion, how feasible, how realistic is that idea?
You know, I think it will be a very dangerous decision for the United States to become the real exporter of LNG. Why? Because the situation is very simple. Now, gas prices in the United States on Henry Hub, they're extremely cheap. They're much cheaper than in Europe, and of course, seriously cheaper than on Asian markets. And if the United States will really begin an export of LNG, we'll see the increasing of gas prices inside the United States. It will be the end of economical policy of Mr. Obama, because Mr. Obama is speaking about returning of factories from Asia to United States, and the main argument is cheap gas, because cheap gas means cheap electricity. If there will be no cheap gas, if there will be no cheap electricity, there will be no economic growth inside the United States. So that is why I am absolutely sure that now we can hear a lot of politically motivated slogans about serious LNG export from United States, but the main aim for United States, in my opinion, is not to struggle with Russia. The main aim is to keep cheap gas and cheap electricity inside United States. That is why United States will not be the serious exporter of LNG if we're speaking about next decade.
Okay, but would it mean cheaper energy bills for Europe, though, surely?
You know, if United States will begin an export of LNG, this gas will be not for Europe. It will be, first of all, for Asia. And the reason is also very simple, because now the gas price in Europe, not for LNG, even for Russian gas, which is a little bit more expensive, is $380, $400 per 1,000 cubic meters. The gas prices in Tokyo, for example, is more than $700. So that is why, of course, if United States will begin an export of LNG, first of all, this LNG will be not for Europe. It will be for Asia. And that is why it's a serious mistake for Europeans to wait for LNG from United States.
Konstantin Simonov, thank you for your time today, talking to us from a very sunny and rather windy Moscow. Thank you. Time for corporate news now then, and it's that time of year where people are thinking about booking their summer holidays. So let's start with Aeroflot. So So Russia's flagship carrier Aeroflot is now the second biggest airline in Europe in terms of passenger volume. According to Airline Business, Aeroflot transported almost 21 million people around the globe in 2013. This is the second year in a row the Russian carrier has made Europe's top 5. And now the CEO is aiming for a top 5 spot for revenue. And Russia's central bank continues its banking cull against dodgy lenders, with 4 more banks losing their licenses this week. Sovicom Bank, MyBank Mortgage, Sberbank Investbank and Energo Business. So far, 22 banks have lost their licenses this year. And part of this extensive cull is to make Russian banks more reliable. Now, according to Forbes, the 3 most reliable banks in Russia are foreign: Citibank, Nordea Bank and HSBC topping the list, with Russia's Sberbank and VTB grabbing the 4th and 5th place. Now, let's join Tim Kirby because I've been discussing financials. I mentioned that VTB made it into the top 5 for the most trustworthy banks here in Russia. Now, last week, Tim, you put all your money into VTB, didn't you, if I remember rightly? Now, let's just put this into context for the viewers then. Every week, you have your money, whatever's left over from your original $10,000 US that you had 3 weeks ago. You span the wheel, and last week it was VTB. So what happened?
Yeah, exactly. Last week, we spun, and it came up VTB Bank, the only bank in Russia that will give me a home loan. Too bad I'm too broke to afford the down payment. But VTB Bank believes in me and I believe in them, and they paid off, increasing by 33% in 1 week. So we're at $13,500. That is very good. And now I'm going to spin the wheel and I'm going to see who we're going to invest in this week. Interestingly enough, though, Russia's private central bank has had a little war against bad and shady lenders. VTB Bank is a reliable lender, but so thus far they've canceled 22 licenses of other lenders. And here we have Dixie. Dixie, just 2 weeks ago, had awesome results. What is Dixie? It is Russia's 3rd largest retailer of food. And because people always need food, it is always reliable to bet on Dixie. Maybe.
Exactly. People have got to eat. Actually, I chose Dixie originally, didn't I? Because it was a Katie's choice.
Yeah, because that was a Katie's choice,
and it
you
worked
gave
out
it
really
to
well.
me.
Super.
But this is also a good test because, hey, 2 weeks ago it went way up.
Yeah.
What's going to happen now?
Well, exactly.
That is the magic of the wheel and the game.
Indeed, I'm looking forward to that one. I did mention I was on a detox as well when we spoke about Dixie. That lasted, well, not even a day. But anyway, good luck. Best of luck to that one. Looking forward to seeing how it performs for a second time.
And good luck on the next detox. Take care, Katie.
All right, Tim Kirby, good luck. And that's all we've got time for. Thank you very much indeed for watching. I'll be on Twitter all week. Have a great one. Goodbye.